Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads to get to those books that have contributed the most to their work, whether it's as a worker, an entrepreneur, whatever it may be, all those lives intersect. And my guest today is Eran Nazario, and Eran is the principal owner of Nazario Motivation, LLC. He's a motivational speaker, consultant, skill trainer, and expert in community crisis response, and has worked in the program management, gang prevention, youth outreach, engagement, and community support field for 30 years. He's an expert in gang prevention and mediation with a proven impact on management of staff and programs, as well as one of the first individuals to tap into the formerly incarcerated as a resource to bring peace to his community. He has trained and presented for youth service agencies, court support services, schools, and many others on a local and national level. His publications include a co-authored poetry book, Bullets into Bells, that describes the impact of gun violence on individuals across the state of Connecticut, and his memoir is Rage to Peace, that hopes to inspire readers to embrace positive change in their lives. Eran, thank you so much for doing this and sitting down with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So the first question, Eran, is always, who are you today? I read your bio. Obviously, it breaks down the amazing work that you are doing. But what does that look like in the day-to-day, just so that the listeners, that the viewers can get a sense for who's sitting in front of them that's going to share their book with us?
Well, thank you for the question. Today, what my day-to-day looks like is really looking for ways and opportunities to what I call is pause human suffering. And I do that by looking at ways that I can create, develop programs, services, efforts, people in an effort to prevent suffering. That looks like identifying young people, school institutions that need training, facilitation, resources, guidance on how to develop and bring out the best in young people that are going to lead our future in a compassionate, empathetic way, looking at ways that they can learn emotional intelligence and things of that nature. It also looks like going into organizations, institutions, and other organizations to help them evolve and develop their capacity to serve community using empathy and compassion as their mindset. So that's what it looks like on a daily basis. Currently, yeah, absolutely.
So when you say prevent suffering, I zero in on certain words. So when you talk about prevent suffering, you talk about empathy. What can you give that a little more substance? Where does that come from for you in terms of what that means for these kids, for these people?
Right. So for me, when I talk about empathy, right, and I talk about preventing suffering, I'm looking at ways that I can have individuals reach a space in their mindset, in their actions, in their words, that guides them in a direction that's safer, healthier, and more productive for them. So that's what I'm looking. I'm looking to change the way people operate, the way they function, the way they receive things that are challenging, right? Any triggers, anything that usually they respond to in a way that's destructive for them. How do they turn that around and make it productive for them? How do they use whatever it is that they're going through right now and manifest something different in their lives that's positive, that's peaceful, that also leads to their improvement?
So Ron, for you, thank you for that great breakdown. For you, where did this come from? Meaning, what did your path look like? And I typically ask my guests to start maybe around high school or wherever they feel their story may start, but just to kind of walk us through the highlights of the areas of their lives where they're picked up certain parts of their story, certain skills, certain experiences. So what did that path look like for you from then to now?
So for me, I always reflect back on what I've learned about myself through today. Right? I'm 55 years old. I have been through a number of things, challenges, right, like many others. But I've learned in my process, right, of not only writing my memoir, but also just doing and serving community, that I had to have some introspection. I had to look within myself to understand what I do and why I am. So when that question like that, I go back as far as I can. I say to myself that I believe this started even before I was born. My mom was traumatized by my dad when she was pregnant. And knowing what I know now at my age, I know that the fetus will in many instances feel what the mom is feeling, will inherit some of the traumas that the mom is feeling and experiencing. So I feel that I was born into trauma. I was born into the suffering that my mom unfortunately had to deal with. And that in turn, I think, embedded in me a seed of a certain trait that I would then exhibit later on, and that was anger, frustration, self-destruction, self-destructive behavior, the inability to look at myself and what I was how I was contributing to that suffering. So I always look at I started then. No, and to answer the question more in more recent times, right? Um, what I know I do on a daily basis is I look for ways that I can become the best listener possible. So I wear two hats. I wear one as a listener and one as a teacher. So I wear that listening hat because by listening I open up my empathy and my compassionate self. And then by teaching, I spread the message of someone's journey in a compassionate, healthy way for other people to absorb and consume. So I think that that's kind of like where it started for me. I really looked way back because I had to do that in order to write this book. I had to do that to live the path that I live right now. I had to look at every possible angle of how I started, right? And that's kind of like where I think it comes from, where I am.
So then in your youth and your coming up and your development, how did the trauma that you feel you sensed when your mother was pregnant with you, how did that manifest in your childhood? What did that look like? What did that path look like?
At first, right? At first, it was very isolating. It was very I would say fragmented. My youth, because I had fear. I had known fear before I was born. So for me, I was considered a very quiet kid, a very shy kid growing up in home. And they say this thing in Puerto Rico, they say, tiene la música por dentro, which is you have the music inside you, right? And for me, that's what it actually was. I had this incredibly tormented soul, right, that was holding on to all these different traumatic experiences, but I was building up this horrific mindset of revenge, right? And to lashing out. And eventually when I felt that I could get strong enough to hurt someone else or to be violent and aggressive and not allow myself to be injured anymore, I did. So it manifested itself in a revengeful mindset, like I'm going to make people pay for trying to hurt me because now I'm strong enough, I'm big enough. So I exploded. It actually evolved as an explosive temper, as an explosive, self-destructive response to anything that I felt was a challenge to me, and that's how it manifested itself.
So then what does that look like through school? What did your path look like today, from then until today?
My path looked like very chaotic, right? Very uncertain, um, very much in touch with the aggressive part of me. So it was fighting in school. It was dropping out of school. It was going to juvenile detention at an early age. It was fighting in prison. It was fighting on the streets. It became me being unhoused and touring my community, looking to find some balance, looking to find a place to eat, looking to find any means of survival. So it manifested itself in a very broken existence, never having really what good footing in anything that I did, not having a dream, not having a path forward, not knowing what it was to have love and to show love in the right and healthy way to anyone that I was in. It manifested itself in tumultuous relationships with women. It manifested itself with distrusting men, right? And in many instances, because I had seen and experienced all the different things that my mom went through and then what we went through due to what my mom went through. So my mom abused us as well eventually, and we ended up being removed by the Department of Children and Families from our custody and placed in foster care, and then shipped over to my dad, who abused us again. We were removed again a second time for child abuse and neglect. So it manifested itself in all these different moments of suffering, and that's why I say my goal, my purpose is to stop human suffering, right? But it manifested itself in those really destructive self-destructive actions that I thought or my salvation from being destroyed, from my salvation of being broken. And as a matter of fact, I was actually breaking myself more, hoping to not live through what I felt I had lived through as a child. So I kept breaking it. I kept dissolving every opportunity, so many opportunities that I could have had to be better. I sabotaged them. I didn't trust them. I thought that I couldn't have those things. I didn't deserve those things. So I would sabotage and break them and destroy them because I thought that's the safest way to be, was in trauma and chaos, right? And uncertainty, because it's what I knew, is what I expected.
Yeah, that's a conversation I've had with so many people of varying backgrounds, varying experiences, trauma of all kinds, where their comfort level, until they learn better, their comfort level is when there's chaos.
Yes.
That when they feel peace, it doesn't feel comfortable.
No.
It's almost like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. If there's peace, it's like, I'm not controlling that. I can control chaos. I can put my mark on chaos of some kind. So
Right.
it's incredible how, again, people from different backgrounds, different experiences, that sometimes they feel more comfort in chaos. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a normal state for you, right, in your mind.
Yes, a state, yes.
Right. So you're literally immersed in this thing, and it is literally driving all your beliefs, right, and all your feelings and everything that you actually strive, right, to be the most chaotic in a situation, because unfortunately, in a very mixed and kind of convoluted way, you're celebrated for that. So you've achieved some sense of glory, right, in such a destructive way. So you see the destruction as, again, as calming, right? And even though later on you realize differently, while you're going through it, it is literally an adrenaline high that you have that it's hard to describe unless you're going through it, right?
It's almost, if you're lashing out and causing the chaos, at least you're in control of what's happening. Your belief in the moment, I would assume.
Yeah.
You know, no one's gonna control you. You're gonna control the chaos of whatever form it may be.
Sure.
So then, your times in juvie and then in prison, what were those for? If you don't mind talking about that.
Oh no, absolutely not. So I was involved in domestic violence incidents when I was younger. I had an older girlfriend who was in her 20s, and I was a teenager, and I thought that my way of controlling, or at least having control over that relationship, whenever it started to dissolve, was to be aggressive, to be impulsive, right? To have those kind of experience, those kind of reactions. And I ended up as a teen. I was 15 years old, with a 20-something-year-old woman, and I thought that I could control it. So I ended up being arrested and accused, rightfully so, of domestic violence. Then I also had instances where I was convicted and also accused of fighting on the streets, being involved in criminality on the streets, and that's what I was. That's kind of like my path into juvenile or young adult prison, and then my adult. Or once I became an adult, an 18-year-old, which is considered at that time an adult. It was more assaults, fights on the streets, breach of peace, resisting arrest, all the things that came with being on the streets and being involved in criminality.
So how many times on and off?
Altogether, in my life, I've been either arrested or incarcerated 7 times for different offenses. The last offense was as part of a RICO indictment that I was part of due to the involvement of the federal government in a criminal organization that I belong to, and that criminal organization was indicted, and I was part of the indictment, so I served time for racketeering and gang involvement and gang actions back in 97, 98, 99, 2000.
Serving those years?
Yes.
Okay, so you talked about your story, the traumas, the chaos of life, the activity into which you fell, that you dropped out of school, juvenile detention, then prison stints.
Yep.
So when did all this start turning around for you? What was the turning point?
That's always such a a good question for me to reflect on, right? Um, so it was really no one moment, right? It was a series of what I call drops of hope, right? A series of interventions, right? And an infusion of a voice that collectively eventually led to me realizing that there was other options and possibilities, right? So I'll start with the first one. I was a young kid. I was homeless and houseless and unhoused in New York City. I had gone to live with my dad, and that didn't work out. So I ended up on the streets, sleeping on trains, and doing living the life of an unhoused individual in New York. And one morning, I'm walking out of a train station. I had slept there at night, and a woman taps me on the shoulder. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I turn around, and I'm at that time, I'm maybe 235, 235 pounds. I got all this stuff going on with me, and I turn around ready, right? If somebody taps you on the shoulder, and I'm like, okay, let's get it, right? Let's do it. Let's defend yourself. And it was this
Yeah.
smaller lady, and she says, "Hi, I'm sorry. I just want to tell you, God has a calling for you." And at that time, it was like, move on, um, right? Because you don't want to hear
Yeah.
that, right? So I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
moving on, and maybe a year later, I'm back in Connecticut, and I'm walking down Oak Street in Hartford, and a second woman does the same thing to me, taps me, turn around, tells me the same thing. I'm like, it immediately brought me back to the past. So I'm like, oh, leave me alone, right? So
Yeah.
I'm moving.
Yeah.
And then I witnessed as part of the organization that I belong to went to war on the streets with about four other organizations, bigger organizations and medium-sized organizations, and part of that included a lot of violence. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of violence, and I witnessed an assault on someone that triggered within me the sense of hopelessness that I felt being abused by my parents. And literally, I saw my life flash before my eyes in this instance. And I said, this can't be what I'm involved in. This cannot be how I continue to evolve in my life. This can't be how, excuse me, how I treat and see other people being treated. It literally brought me back to that. Right there in that moment, I started reflecting on what did I want to be? Who did I want to be? Um, what kind of person was I really? Uh, and I started to question my involvement with this organization. I started to question how fair it was that I was looking at people that looked like me, were in many similar situations like me, but still willing to allow them to be hurt or injured. And that started kind of to the doubt in what I was being involved in and what I was actively engaged in started to kind of push me away from that mindset. And I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be in more quiet spaces. I wanted the chaos to stop, right? I wanted the suffering to stop. And again, I say a lot of times that sometimes, your childhood trauma can also instill in you compassion in some way, shape, or form. And I felt that right at that moment, the compassion inside of me started questioning why I was involved in this kind of stuff. So I always credit those kind of things for that. And just so happens that the universe, right? Energy, the universe, God, whoever you believe in, however you believe, intervened when someone noticed that I had that particular aura, that energy, that ability, and they say, "Hey, would you mind serving as a speaker or a person that speaks about the life of a gang member, a person in these kind of things?" And they saw that in me, and I said, "Sure," and I did it. And once I did it, and I saw the impact of my story on some people in an audience, and how people felt that it was more powerful for me to speak about transformation and positivity and right, that eventually became the space I wanted to be in. We just cracked open a little bit of a door to say, wait a second, you can do something different and still yet be known for something still be known for something, instead of doing what you were doing.
So, in being removed from, obviously, every kid, we're supposed to learn those kinds of lessons from our parents. right? You were
Yeah.
removed from your mom's house, removed from your dad's house.
Right.
And there was no one else in your life to kind of guide you out on that path or give you the advice or ask you those kind of questions.
Right. No, there wasn't. Um, I started first learning about having conversations at all. Um, was with the members of the group I was involved with, because when I started shifting my mindset in there, I started talking to some of the brothers and sisters that were part of the group, and I would say, so how you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about doing this to our brothers and sisters? Doing, and people were like, I don't like it because I grew up with those people. Like, we were on the same basketball teams, right? We were in the same
Yeah.
grocery stores. Our moms went to the same churches. Like, but now here I'm expected to injure them because we belong to separate rival groups, right? I don't feel it. It feels horrible to me. I don't want to be a part of it. Like, and I started listening, and that started to really activate in me a different purpose. Like I wanted to be different. I wanted for them to not have to feel what I was feeling. So it started there, right? It started right there in those spaces.
So when you had that particular moment, that flash of violence, and it took you back to your childhood and reassessing what it is you wanted and needed,
Right.
aside from those conversations where you asked people in your organization, how do you feel about this? What else were you doing that somebody would ask you, hey, do you mind speaking on what you know, what you're experiencing? What else, what else were you doing that people noticed aside
Right.
from maybe the people in your organization that somebody would invite you to come talk at their organization or their group?
Right. So it started actually within the group itself. I stood up one day with the support of a few of the brothers, and I said, "Hey, I feel that this organization, based on everything we're seeing, we need somebody people can talk to. We need like a counselor. We need like a mentor. We need somebody that people can lean on because it was a violent. I mean, you're talking about like shootings and all kinds of violence all day long, right? So this is all you're immersed in, right? And it was breaking people. People were running and leaving and using and things like that, and it was just crumbling. And for me, it was also about protecting the structure that I have finally been a part of because I didn't have structure for all my life. So even regardless of how dysfunctional this was, it was structure
It
somehow.
was
Right?
structure.
And I wanted to figure out a way to save that structure, to protect that structure because it helped me, right, find a space where I belonged. So I actually went out in a public meeting and said to the leadership, "Hey, we need this." And it's all and again, being what it was back then, we're like, "You stupid! You want to do it? You do it then.
Yeah,
You go
yeah.
ahead. You do it, stupid. Like you do it." So I said, "Okay, stupid, we'll do it." So I went around and I talked to a few people, and there was a really deep religious belief group in within the organization. There were people that prayed every day and all that. So I went out over to one of my brothers and said, listen, would you mind joining me and becoming that mentor, like guide and whatever? And he said, I'm down for that. And we just started meeting separately as a group and having conversations, and that spawned in leadership an idea that whenever anybody wanted to talk to us, whether it was the police chief, a clergy, a community outreach person, that I should be the person to speak, that I should be the person that they reach out to. And that's how it started. Whenever, going back a little bit, when the war exploded and people were being, unfortunately injured at a really high rate, city government, state police, et cetera, all said, we need an intervention. We need something to stop this suffering that's happening. So one of those folks came up with the idea of bringing in the voices of the groups because they were your residents, right? They were your people. They were the people suffering through this too. And I was identified as that voice to go on behalf of the organization to speak to the police chief, the mayor, different people. And at that meeting is when they finally said, wait a second, we hear you. We're hearing your experiences. How about we make you a part of this? Like, can we invite you to more meetings? And with that invitation, can you guarantee us that you'll work on a ceasefire with these other groups so we can find solutions to what's causing this, right? And that's how I kind of was propelled into that limelight or that spotlight where I became the spokesperson for the organization.
And the leadership of your organization was okay with you
Yeah,
doing that?
yeah. See, I was not involved in illicit like selling and that kind of thing. So I was a safe option to do that because I wasn't involved in anything. Some of the leadership, many of them were involved in that, so there
Yeah.
were a risk at being on front and center,
Incriminated,
right? Right,
self-incriminated. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I went in, but it was helping. It was helping the purpose that I had developed in my mind. Like even though they're sending me because I'm being used as the voice, I was saying yes. Now maybe more of my brothers and sisters can be heard, and we can figure out a way to solve this, and get us to, or at least help us do different things. So that's they weren't necessarily 1,000% behind it, but I was an option. So I feel that that was a win-win for them in a sense.
No, it's amazing. So then, Iran, what does it look like from then when you start being the voice, I guess, of reason
Yeah.
to the public organizations, to the authorities, to bring these groups together to help implement ceasefires? From then, what does it look like in terms of you're starting to be the voice?
Yeah.
What does it look like from then to now, where
Yeah.
you're this foremost expert on
Yeah.
all these different areas?
Well, the way it looked is initially the organization um, started to become fractured itself because of different indictments and different legal challenges that the organization had. While at the same time, we were building a separate cohort of people that were becoming the voices of gang prevention, right? So it started looking like that. So, excuse me, the University of Connecticut School of Social Work was doing some research on the impact of joblessness and homelessness and poverty on the Hartford community. And that person that was leading that charge, his name is Dr. Michael Borrero. And Dr. Borrero went out into the community and distributed flyers about research and what they were wanting to accomplish. I happened to get a copy of one of those things from him. I reached out to him, and not too long after that, I was hired to work for the Hartford Housing Authority in Hartford to lead their first ever gang outreach and intervention project. As part of that, while I was still an active member too, I wore the colors, I still did all that, but because I was a spokesperson and they had seen me, been active in different meetings, they gave me an opportunity and they hired me, and then that translated into jobs for other brothers and sisters from different organizations. At first, it was just removing asbestos from the housing complex and all of that, and then that led to union jobs and union positions for certain members, and then that right there catapulted me into an even bigger spotlight where I was in the newspaper. People were learning about me. It became this whole, this whole kind of firestorm space where people were not only praising me for doing what I was doing, but also attacking me for not being worthy of those spaces and those things. And
Hmm.
that then brought out University of Connecticut, Michael Borrero. He offered me a contract to work at UConn at the Institute for Violence Reduction, which he led, and that then allowed me to hire 15 other people from different groups around the city to work at the Institute on leading the charge in communicating the impacts of gang violence, what we were doing, what we needed to change. That then sparked a youth program that came out of the University of Connecticut Institute for Violence Reduction, which was then housed at different middle schools to teach kids about the dangers of gangs and gang involvement and gang life. And again, that continued to evolve. I fell in love with service and serving and helping young people and community. That I remained there for a number of years. I developed my skill set, my ability to speak. I went back to school, got my high school diploma, went different programs around UConn to help me learn about community orientation, evaluation, program goals and design, all these different things that I needed to do in my career. And that gave me the confidence to continue to develop more and more while I was also watching other people develop into super leaders, amazing people within the organization. And hence, fast forward, again, I fell in love with service, but I also felt like I had obtained a goal of becoming like my mentors, right? John Wardlaw, Michael Borrero, and a number of other people. I wanted to lead an organization. I wanted to found something. I wanted to be the leader of something. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I still had a whole lot more things to learn. I still had cases. I still had criminal, indictment. I still had enemies on the street. I still had a number of things to work out. but I knew I wanted to eventually get to a space where I was leading an effort to help the community, and that evolved when I founded the Peace Center 10 years ago in Hartford, and I became the CEO and founder of the Peace Center and I finally achieved that goal of being that person. And the Peace Center itself was committed to helping not only the Hartford community find peace through my efforts, but also the state of Connecticut. So I was able to travel across the state of Connecticut to different communities and hear and listen and learn to what peace meant to them from a very grassroots, using a very grassroots lens, not necessarily peace through yoga, meditation, things like that.
Yeah.
Looking at peace through human interaction, right? Looking at peace to stopping violence, right? To stopping gang violence, to stopping youth violence and adult violence and things of that nature. That's the lens that I used, and that's how it evolved to where I am today.
Oof.
Yeah,
Amazing. Incredible. But how long did it take from that the moment that you had where you were wrapped up in the violence on the street,
right,
and you started thinking in that sense, like, this doesn't make sense. Is this really what I want? How long did it take from that to when you were invited to go work at UConn?
That was, I want to say 6 years, because again, we were in the midst of a very, very serious and violent war. And
what years was this
so we're talking
around?
90, 94, 95, 96,
Okay.
97. So in the midst of all of that, I was actually on both sides of the fence, meaning I'm working at Hartford Housing Authority, but I'm also an active member, right? So I'm doing my best to balance both because I didn't feel like I wanted to quit on the structure and family that I had developed within this group, right? But I also knew how much it was destroying different opportunities for not only myself but the members of the group. So and I also know I was a target. I was a human public target, right, for those enemies that we had and those rival groups that we had. And I also knew that I had targets myself because if you're making me a target, I have to defend myself and make you a target, right? So how do I speak from both sides of my mouth, right? Like, I've stopped violence, but I'm gonna do what I gotta do to right.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of time to convince the leadership that this was contrary to what we needed to do. So in that time, it was tumultuous. It was this battle back and forth with my morals, my values, my systems, right, my safety. How do I balance and navigate all this? So in those 6+ years, it's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of funerals, right? A lot of sadness, a lot of torment, but also a lot of joy too, right? I was witnessing young people, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old say, I'm not going to join because you told me it's not cool. I'm not going to join. So I'm experiencing those two different polar opposites spaces, but I don't have the skill set to navigate both. I'm just doing it. I'm doing it based on how I feel. Like my gut is saying, you know what? Nah, I might not want to go there. Yeah, I want to go over there, right? And I'm learning it as I'm going. Nobody's coaching me on how to manage the two. And eventually listening and watching my mentors, right, and watching their leadership and listening to and being a study of everything they did to manage their day and manage the business, I started to believe that I could be them. Once that seed was planted, I wasn't going to look back. So it took me a few years, and I feel that so many things fell in place. The indictments, and again, I'm not. If you are involved in criminality, you have consequences you have to face, right? And I understand that. I also understand that given the right resources and opportunities, some people would choose not being criminals over being criminals. It's just the way that I felt. So by being involved in that particular business and being involved in those opportunities, I was able to convince other people on how to move differently in their lives to make their lives better. So it took years to do that. That's a long process. And even then, right at the height of my evolution, I'm indicted by the FBI for racketeering for crimes committed the 6 years ago, like 6 years prior. So it was just almost like, oh, you think you've arrived?
Yeah.
Let's put you back in your place. And I understood it. right? I had to be held accountable, and I was. However, if anything, it fueled me to want to fight harder, right? To pick myself up from that.
So how I can see the through line from your childhood and even
Mm.
before you were born to now.
Right.
You've made that clear. You've painted this very vivid picture. But it's a question I always ask my guests, so I want to see the exact words that you would use in responding to it.
Sure.
So does it make sense from your childhood that this is what you're doing? How do you connect the two? Again, I can see the connection. You've said so much about it, but asking you the direct question, is there anything else you want to share about that connection? Because I'm always curious about my guests, about my clients, who they were as a kid and how that factors in, plays into, and shows up in the work that they're doing now. So again, you said so much, but is there anything else you want to add to that connection to your childhood and the work you're doing today?
Yeah, thank you. Brilliant question, brother. Thank you so much for that. We should ask that question of ourselves a lot, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
for me, right, I feel that it makes sense. What I'm doing now makes sense for a number of reasons, right? But the one I think it makes the most sense for me, the one experience as a child, is the sense of hopelessness that I felt at that time as a young person, right? The the inability to defend myself, the inability to speak, the inability to change the conditions that I was in. I feel like that propelled me into a space now where I want to change those for others, where I want to have individuals find those solutions, not necessarily through someone else coming in and providing it for them, which you need anyway, but
Hmm.
for them realizing the capacity that they have to change it, right? Because I didn't know I had it. I didn't know I could speak out. I didn't know that. And when you teach someone that at a younger age, and they're able to find that particular voice and that particular courage, it
Yeah.
changes how they approach life. It changes how
Mhm.
they move. So I think that that's
Yeah.
definitely my deep answer to that.
It's incredible how even adults, even in coaching adults, you ask them a specific question or a general question, you make a comment or you make them think about something that they've never been asked,
Mhm.
and it can turn their behavior around,
Yeah.
their perception of the world, their self perception. So, and like you said, so many of these kids grow up in atmospheres and environments and neighborhoods where no one asks them,
Mm.
what's your voice? What do you have to contribute? They
Sure.
just kind of get swept up in whatever's taking place.
Right, right. And to me, in everything that I've developed, all the programs that I've managed, developed, and implemented, I cannot do that unless I literally take everything into account that a young person is bringing to the table. Everything, every asset, every possible challenge, right? And every hope and thrill and fear and everything that they have and make it a part of the practice, right? A part of what I'm doing. It cannot succeed without that input. It cannot succeed without that vision in them, right? And the realization that these people, these clients, these humans, right, bring a whole load of things with them that you have to be able to break through, sift through, right, to help them
Yeah.
see and hear themselves in a way that's productive for them, right? And being realistic about the fact that you can't do this by yourself, right? You're going to need additional bodies, additional minds, additional hearts, right, to help you navigate all the different things that you're dealing with, right? When you cope with it on your own, in many instances, what happens is, especially at younger, you have your own, vices and your own devices. You tend to lead to something that looks familiar, and in many instances, the exact same thing that's hurting you, that you lean to because it looks familiar, right?
It's
So
all you know.
that's all you know. It looks familiar, looks safe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right, I have a quick story. I'm driving one day. I just finished coming home from federal prison, and I'm focused. I'm laser focused. I got to get back on what I want to do, and I'm driving my car like I did many times. I'm driving down Park Street in Hartford, and I see a guy I know on the street, and he's doing his thing. I pull up and I say, What's good, my guy? How you doing?" Etc. "Oh, I'm good. What's going on? Can you give me a ride?" And I had done that I don't know how many times, man. Like, just hop in, let's go. I thought instantly, said, "Before I give you a ride, though,
Where are we going?
right? Where we
Yeah.
going? What you holding, man?" Like, what's on
Yeah.
you? Like, what do you have? Oh, nah, I'm going over here, and all I got is a little bit of, a little substance on me. And I said, oh, I can't ride with you, man. Oh, no, what you mean? I can't not push you from here to there, knowing that what you holding and knowing the impact it can have on me, because you never
Yeah.
really know what the next block is going to hold, right? Then you don't know. I know, but in many instances you may not know the full extent of it. What is that involvement that this person has contributing to their suffering, and who's watching them, who's going after them, who wants what they have. So
Yeah.
you take all that into consideration because it's a risk, right? So I decide no, I get called all kinds of names, offy, all that stuff, and I move on. Don't you know, a week later I find out they got arrested 3 blocks down from where I was driving, right,
Yeah.
for carrying, because they have been watching them. Not 90% sure, not leave a 10% open window, that if I had gotten them in my car and went down, they would have pulled the car over just to, and I would have been, unfortunately, in violation of my parole and all that other
Yeah.
stuff that I was facing. So I feel that you have to make these decisions, right? And you have to talk to young people about these decisions. You have to talk to the people you work with about these decisions.
It's almost like a game of chess,
Yes.
but somebody born in that environment is not born with those tools. Like
No.
somebody, it has to be somebody from the community that elevates their thinking, their desire, like you, to get better, to provide something back.
Yeah.
But you can so easily get swept up in, yeah, I'll give you a ride, hop in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you determine and you get that, you develop that ability to think in chess, okay, stop right here. Where is this going to lead?
Yeah.
If you ask me this and I say yes, or if I answer in the wrong way, what's going to happen, whether it's violence, whether it's a fight, there's just so many different things where so many steps and points in your life at that time where you have to think
Oh, yeah.
2 or 3 steps ahead.
You have
Because
to.
if you don't, you're just going to walk in blind.
Yeah, you're gonna walk in blind, and again, I appreciate the chess analogy, right? Because it is literally looking at your life on a board and saying, okay, which one of these pieces, right, do I want to sacrifice, right, to get to the final goal? And sometimes you have to sacrifice being called something out of
Yeah.
your name in order to protect the big picture, right? The end
Yeah.
goal. So yeah, I've evolved that mindset, that thinking, not necessarily because I don't care about the human people that I'm talking about, but because in order for me to be
You got to break
well,
that cycle.
right, and in order for me to be well, I have to make those decisions, and my wellness equals their support, right? And I think that you need to be in a space where you are well enough to care for other people. You just cannot care, sacrifice, and never really look at yourself and the risk you're taking when you're doing that.
Arad, can you give some examples of the programs? I'm curious, especially because you're somebody that grew up in that environment, in those neighborhoods, in those communities, and it's different when somebody from outside develops a program. I would think versus somebody who grew up in those communities, in those neighborhoods. So, can you just give a couple examples of the programs you developed
Sure.
and maybe why you developed it that way, just to give people a sense of what it means to put something like that together, and then the specific connection you have to it, having come through that same neighborhood or environment.
Right. So I'll go way back to when I first started. When I first started at the housing authority, I was charged with connecting with young people and helping them make the decision to not join a gang, right? So for me, at that point, what I had to do is I had to understand the fear that was felt by the young people that were immersed in this lifestyle that didn't ask for, right? So for
Yeah.
me, it was like, okay, what are you afraid of? How is it that you move through here based on that fear? What decisions are you making or not making based on that fear? And how can I help that fear be reduced so you can function better? An afraid person usually will defend themselves, right? They'll look for ways to defend themselves, and sometimes it could be with a substance, it could be with a weapon, it could be with something. And I wanted to remove that. So I first identified an emotional connection to whatever it was that these kids were feeling, and then I develop and design efforts that will make them feel safe. Fear, safety, right? How can I get you from fear to safety? Knowing that, I helped develop, in partnership with other organizations, a program inside the housing complex itself, where kids can go for about 5 hours a day and feel safe. Now you're reducing the level of anxiety, the level of fear for a
Mm.
long extended period of time, which allow them to see clearly themselves, see clearly what they can do for themselves, and connect with someone on an emotional, personal level that was different than if I just gave them a basketball and say play, or gave them a football and say go play. Yes, it's fun, etc. However, the core of you, the fear that you're feeling, the destruction that fear is causing inside of you is not being healed, right? It's not being lessened. So I created programs and projects like that. So that was the first outreach project. At UConn, when I was there, I created two programs there with Mike Burrow's assistance and the Institute. First, we developed a way to heal, right, the members of the groups that were working with us. So we created social work type of spaces where we can hear the voices and fears and different challenges that the members of the organizations were feeling to in order for us to identify what leadership skills they already had that they didn't even know they had based on everything they had been through, right? So we had separate focus groups, separate conversations. We actually developed a speakers bureau where we taught these individuals how to tell their story from a place of compassion, a place of bravery, a place of honest conversation about what you were feeling. Because some of these guys are
Yeah.
huge guys, huge ladies, tough, been through everything. But we wanted to actually dig deeper into what it was that they were feeling emotionally to support them. So many of my programs are built on emotional intelligence, right? I feel that the more emotionally intelligent you are, not
Hmm.
only are you better at listening, you're also better at evolving, and you're also better at communicating who you are and actually having empathy to somebody else's story. So all of my programs, every single program, the youth programs, the community outreach programs, the prison visiting programs that we've had, where we go in and teach emotional intelligence and incarcerated individuals, right? All of those programs have an emotional intelligence arm. Where can I
Yeah.
get these people, these individuals, to a place where now emotionally they've understood that this is why I may be behaving this way. And because of these emotional spaces, because of these injuries, because of this emotional, not lack of intelligence, but this emotional unawareness or
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
aware of that, I am contributing to that, to my own demise. I am reacting to these things.
That makes complete sense just because there's so much emotional trauma
Yeah.
in those groups
Yes.
where the foundation of it, from what I've understood before talking to you and talking to you, like the foundation of all of that is fear and survival.
Yes. Yes.
So, you're always ready. It's fight or flight. And it makes sense that you would infuse emotional intelligence in all those programs because that's the foundation of just that trajectory. Do
Yeah.
you want to get hijacked by your emotions that are going to lead you down these paths that you don't know what's going to happen?
Right.
Or do you want to learn the tools, look at the chessboard, take a
Yeah.
step back and assess, right?
Right.
Around for you, where did the whole emotional intelligence, the actual application or understanding or learning of emotional intelligence, where did you pick that up? When was the first time you really looked at? Because I mean, we can all say we need to control our feelings, but then when you
Yeah.
start using phrasing like emotional intelligence,
Right.
that says to me you kind of saw it somewhere, you learned it. So where
Yeah.
was it that you first picked up on emotional intelligence as a tool to utilize going
Yeah.
forward?
It was not a very proud moment when it happened. My son, I have a son who's 25 now, and when my son was born, he was born preemie. He was like 2 pounds, right? He was born way premature. He was on a ventilator and all these different things. So I was visiting my son at Hartford Hospital in Hartford on a daily basis, and we had this practice called kangaroo. And the way they do it is they get like a towel or a blanket, and they create it almost like a kangaroo's pocket.
Yeah.
And they take the baby and they put the baby there so the baby can feel your heartbeat,
Yep.
and it helps them develop their lungs and all that. And that's incredible to just, that's a whole nother conversation on just how that happens. It's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Incredible.
I left my son to go get something, and hold on and behold, my mom shows up to visit. And I'm in the elevator with my mom, and we're going up to see my son in the NICU unit, the neonatal intensive care unit. And my mom is giving me advice on how to parent. So I'm I'm boiling. I am boiling inside. I'm like, okay, hold on, right? So by the time we got to the last floor, I blew up on my mom.
Yeah.
Again, not a very proud moment. I was just like, Mom, who are you? Why are you telling? And I just went off. I said some things I shouldn't have said, and I realized before I got off the elevator, I was bringing that energy to my son.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
bringing that
Yeah.
energy to my son. So I stopped there, and my mom was crying. We had this horrible exchange in the elevator, and I said to Mom, Mom, you know what? I realized just now that I've never forgiven you, and that's why I reacted the way I did. I'm sorry. I forgive you. I gave her a hug. I said, I can't bring this sin to my son. I can't do that. He needs every part of me that he needs is has to be ready for him, and it has to be compassionate, it has to be kind, it has to be soft. I can't bring this in
Yeah.
with me. And that moment right there, I didn't know that was called emotional intelligence. I didn't know the name. But what I
Yeah.
knew
Yeah.
was that the impact that my mom's presence had on me completely broke all my calm that I was feeling for that I needed to feel at the moment to be there for my son. And right there at that moment, I said, I can't allow more control, more emotional control, um, my mom's emotional control over me anymore. And that's the first kind of hint at I need to be more emotionally ready for something. So that's where it started. It evolved little by little as I started to understand all the triggers, all the emotional responses. And then lastly, I had a session with a pastoral counselor for a year, and I was diagnosed with an impulsive disorder, stress impulse disorder, and it was directly tied to my emotional instability and control. And knowing that, again, it evolved into what I know to be emotional intelligence today.
So, when did you learn about the emotional intelligence, like the actual phrase?
Yeah, I
And then you
learned.
were probably like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay, this is what it." So
yeah,
when did you come across the I guess the model, the
yeah.
paradigm, the concept of
Right.
actual emotional intelligence?
I came to that in maybe 2001. I was leading a group at a middle school, and the name the group's at least process was we're going to listen and talk from the heart. That's what we're going to do in these sessions. We're going to listen and talk from the heart. And my mentor, Mike Barrero, said the longest distance in the world is between the heart and the mind because we can put so many things in place to protect the heart by using the mind. So we're going to flip that and we're going to create conversations from the heart. And that's the first time that I started learning about the model emotional intelligence, where it was used. Let's be emotionally intelligent and ready to sit and have these conversations with these teens. It's the first time I learned more of the structured way of calling it,
Yeah.
and then I fell in love with that process.
Around, what do you consider your superpower?
My superpower, I would say, is my compassion, and it's the action and compassion. That I think that's my superpower. I see something that needs healing and I jump to it immediately. I see something that needs compassion or it needs an action to heal it, solve it, mend it, make it feel better, right? It makes me do that. And it could be as simple as an act of kindness to someone that you know just needs a word or needs a hug or needs an ear or needs an actual an act of kindness, right? I had a neighbor here next door. He's no longer here. His family had passed away. He was by himself, but he had a lot of needs, right? Physical needs, emotional needs, mental health needs. So he couldn't mow his lawn. I could easily say, well, whatever, let it, whatever. But to me, I couldn't do that. So I would go and mow the person's lawn. They never asked me once to do it. I just said, let me just do it. Whenever it was snow, I noticed that they would only be able to shovel a path to the stairs, and then they had to climb through the snow. So I would plow the snow for them, and never once did I talk to them, ask them, and anything. I just felt in my heart that that's what I should do, right? So I will do that in many instances for different people in whatever capacity that I can to help. So I would say my compassion, but not only just the feeling of compassion, but the acts and compassion. It's my superpower.
Around, for you, Did you ever see that when you were growing up? Any instances, even though you had your realization, your wake up moment, again, in that your violence, the violence that you were seeing in front of you, you're like, I don't want to, is this really what I want to do? Is this really the path I want to go down? Did you have any areas, any people of compassion in your life, but you just didn't want to hear it? Or was there no one that offered anything?
Well, again, knowing what we know now, you and I both, right? We know what we've learned.
Yeah.
My brother was the first person to teach me compassion, my oldest brother. And it happened in a very bad situation. So my mom took to injuring me and hurting me for a number of reasons. And on several instances, my brother would jump in front of the beating to take the beating for me. And that's again, I didn't know it was compassion at that time. I just knew that I wasn't being hit, and I was watching my brother take the beatings. So I feel that was the first kind of time that it happened. And then I feel that second to that, where I realized what compassion was as more of an adult, was the time when I went to state prison here, and I had a friend of mine visit that I didn't know could visit me. They visited me, and they said the first time I had heard somebody say, "We miss you, we miss your spirit, we miss your energy, we miss your potential. Just know I'm here to tell you that you were missed." Was the second time I felt like somebody wasn't missing the hands or the ability to fight. They were missing the person. And I think that was another place where I felt compassion was present.
Well, thank you for sharing those examples.
Yes. Yeah.
And before we jump into your book, last question before that, what does leadership mean to you? How do you view leadership? What does great leadership look like?
Right. So for me, being in a leadership position, I feel like being a listener, right? Like listening to those people you want to lead to, is ensuring that everyone is involved in the leadership and whatever it is you're leading, right? So inclusivity, making sure that everyone is included in that particular space. And third, having accountability, right? And following through on the things that you say you're going to do. Right. So those three particular things, or those particular assets, or acts, or abilities, are what I consider leadership. Because without those things, I can't be a leader.
Yeah.
Right.
And then let's jump in your. We were going to discuss your book, your memoir, but at the same time, can you just tell us a little bit about the poetry book and how that came to be? Your contribution to that.
Right. So I was part of an statewide initiative, to help reduce gun violence, and that came about just folks knowing who I was and what I was doing in Hartford. So they kind of rounded up a group of folks that were about that particular vision and mission across the state. And I was asked to actually contribute. And these were all individuals who had suffered some type of loss due to gun violence. So they called it Bullets into Bells, and that's the name of the book. And what I was asked to do was write a poem about how gun violence impacted me personally. And I wrote a poem called "What the Gun Made," and it talked about how it broke me down and what happened and about my brother and things of that nature. Everyone in the book had a story, a poem that they wrote about how guns impacted their lives.
What do you mean? You just referenced your brother. What do you mean as it pertains to the poem?
Yeah. So my brother was murdered. The brother I talked about, he was murdered in Hartford, and I talked a little bit about that particular what the gun made as a result of his murder, right? And what happened. So it was a devastating loss to me, because again, as I mentioned, he taught me compassion. He was the person that put his body in front of me. He was my only blood brother, father. So I lost him on the streets in Hartford.
My condolences.
Thank you.
And then your memoir, how did that come to be? How does that even get started? I mean, I can imagine somebody hearing your story, the way that I've heard it,
Right.
and it's like it's almost obvious to commit something like that to paper for somebody to read, take in, and understand. So how did that come
Right.
to be?
So there are two ways. One, I've been involved and immersed in this work for a long time, um, and I wanted to I wanted the purpose and the mission to reach more people. I wanted to encourage more individuals to reflect in introspectively on what it is that we need to do to heal from these things. So that's one angle, right? I needed more people to see it. There's only so much you can do in the space that you're in.
Yeah.
Um, but second to that, I needed to do some work on healing myself. So the book took me 7 years to write, 7.5 years, and primarily because I um, wasn't ready to embrace everything that I had really, really been through, right? All the different things that I had experienced. And second, I had a car accident and I had a brain injury that wiped out a lot of my memories. And I was in a coma for about 3.5 months. And when I came out of the coma, I had some brain injury. And that really hampered my ability to remember and recall. So I had to interview people that knew me as a young person, people that were around, people that could add facts to what I was remembering. And that was a um, pretty incredible process to sit with people that had varying opinions of you and what you experienced in comparison to what you remembered. Um,
Yeah.
so, so yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a process I felt was important for my healing as well. A lot of crying, right? A lot of darkness that came out, even things you didn't remember about your treatment, right? That you had received and things that you had done and things, people that were still angry with you and bitter with you and you needed to apologize to. That whole process, right, had to happen in order for me to find healing, greater healing in myself.
So how did you lay out the book? How did you want to take the reader down that path? Is it similar to the way you laid it out here? How did you, I guess the one thing is, did somebody mention to you that you should write a book, or you just thought about it and it was something you wanted to get to, or did somebody suggest it to you?
Well, no, someone always says, "Say, tell your story." So I
Yeah.
was actually I was part of many public speaking forums. Tell your story, tell your story, tell your story, and I felt that that was a way of continued healing for me. So no one said, "Hey, write a book," but someone said, "Keep telling your story," right?
Mm.
And I started reading, different books that were similar in the way that I wrote, and I started to realize, what these look at the impact I feel from those people. I know that I can hopefully have the same impact on other people. How can I get the voice out there to have that impact? So I think that's the way it evolved. And the way I set it up, as your initial question, is I wanted first for people to feel my greatest loss, and then understand um, what the losses that I sustained throughout those periods, but also why I behaved the way I did. Right. So it's kind of like set up that way.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what did that look like in terms of those? I think you said 6 or 7 years of writing it.
Yeah.
Was it just kind of writing and putting it off to the side? Was it,
Yeah.
going back and tweaking and retweaking? What did that look like in that period of time to get to the final product?
Well, it took on many different forms. I didn't know how to write a book. Obviously, never writing in a book. I didn't know many authors personally so I started doing what I thought I could do. It was just like how to write a book, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I got a
Just
tons,
start and go.
just so many different things came at me. Do this, you should do that, you should close your eyes, whatever. So I was like, I don't know what to do here. So I just started writing down notes, like a series of notes everywhere, just notes, notes. Oh, remember this, remember that. And then I started interviewing and talking to authors I knew that I eventually got to learn. I was like, hey, how'd you write your book? How'd you write your book? And I got, again, varying different opinions on what to do, what the best process was. And so for me, it was a series of notes, a series of audio recordings. I have like tons of hours of me just talking into a computer about things, people interviewing me until I found the right thing for me to do, which was leave my space and go to a quiet place and just write. And that's the most effective tool that I had. I realized actually I didn't know this before I started writing. I didn't know how much I actually loved the mountains. I didn't know, I didn't no idea how much I loved the mountains until I started writing. I took a trip to the mountains in the Berkshires and I wrote literally almost 90 pages of the book looking at the mountains. I said, this is it. This is the spot. This is what I must need, right? So it evolved that way, and that's the way that I approached it. So interviewing people, interviewing authors, writing on my own, writing notes, listening to documents, even watching YouTube videos on how to write a book. But eventually, I found my place, which was isolation, seclusion by the mountains, which I never would have expected, and now that's where I do my writing.
How did you end up by the mountains?
So I was finding it hard to be home in the work that I was doing. I was a first responder, crisis supporter, crisis response worker. So I was on call 24 hours a day. And I could not write this book. I just could not. There were so many instances where I was called out to help and be a crisis responder, etc. I just didn't have. So I just said, let me just go over here and find out, just get some space. And I took all my books, I took all these different articles, artifacts, you name it, and I started writing. It worked. And it was just it was literally a guess. A need. I need to be quiet. I need to get away from all this trauma, and it worked. It worked for me. And yeah, it's been great. Even writing my second book that I'm publishing now in September. Same thing. I went to the mountains, and man, listen, it was incredible for me to do that.
What's the next book on, or what are you covering in the next book?
Can I show an image here while we talk?
Absolutely, whatever you want to. Yeah, man.
Excellent, sweet. So this is the cover of the second book.
Okay.
It's called The Original Peace Builder.
Okay.
So the book itself talks about and chronicles my journey to being a peace builder. So it's different than the memoir that I wrote, Rage to Peace, where this one really focuses on the fibers that I developed and created and was able to create within me to take on peace building work, what I experienced as a peace builder, what I felt peace building work was like, and really what I'm looking to do in this book is really pay homage and a tribute to the people that are out there giving everything they have to stop violence in communities.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and
incredible.
I can describe the puzzle. So this right here is puzzle pieces. I don't know if you've noticed them, but
yeah,
they're indicative of I'm a work in progress. I still have many more pieces to complete, just like we all do. So that's the second book. It'll be out in September.
Congrats on that, buddy.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
I'm curious, Arad. In writing this book, you said you were doing interviews, you were doing whatever you could to kind of recall all the information from the past, right? That it was a learning moment or learning moments, talking to different people, interviewing different people, being interviewed by different people. Just so much of that. But what was the most that you took away from this book? How did this book change you the most? What stands out the most in terms of how you've evolved because this book is out?
Right. Oh, that's an awesome question. Thank you. If I will. As I'm thinking about what I learned the most, I learned that I could do the harder things, right? This was a really traumatic reliving, right, of what I had endured, and many of the things that I learned through my interviews and conversations that I had either trauma paused in my head, right, trauma blocked in my head,
yeah,
or were too painful for me to revisit because I didn't want to think that someone hurt me that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll give you one example. I had the blessing and fortune to find and to find the person who removed me from my mother's care that many years ago and sit with him at a coffee shop. He's in his late 70s, and he said, I was the first child, my brother and I were the first children that he removed from custody. So he vividly remembers how traumatic it was on him to have to remove kids from their parents' care. And I sat with him and I listened to everything that he saw that made the decision for us to be removed. And it broke me to hear it, right? Because I was like, wow, like that was the extent of it. I didn't remember, but now I have it, and then it brought me back to remembering, right? So I feel like this book allowed me to believe that I can do hard things, right? In the depth that required. How it changed me since it's been written, it has opened me to being even more of a listener, and to realize that I have more in common with other people than I thought I did. And I'll share one quick story if you don't mind, right?
Oh, go ahead.
I went to visit a gentleman whose wife bought my book. So when I first wrote the book, I made a decision that anyone from Connecticut that bought the book, I would visit them and thanking them, and I would autograph the book for them. You know, I would do that. So as people would write to me, hey, I bought your book. So I decided to visit. I visited, I don't know how many homes to this date, but I visited this one home. And this gentleman was maybe late 70s, early 80s, whose wife had bought the book and she wanted me to sign it. So I did. When I was sitting there with him, the gentleman says, I saw my wife reading this book and wondering what it's all about. So I decided to read it myself. And I have some questions for you. So I sat. I usually wanted to allot 15 minutes per visit. It didn't work out that way. It did not work out that way, brother. So I sat with this gentleman for about almost 2 hours. And what I learned from him was what he had done to perpetuate the systemic racism on people of color. He told me, he confessed, he said, this is what my company used to do to discriminate and to invalidate the applications on people that wanted services or help, but we were instructed that people of color couldn't receive that help. And he said, based on after reading your book and having this conversation, I'm going to publicly confess, in not only at church but also to my groups, and tell them what we need to do to make amends for all the things that we have done. So this book opened incredible avenues for me to hear other people's not only real truths, facts, but also suffering. So when I walk around, I wasn't doing it much before, but I don't do it at all now, right? Where I can assume that someone is on this particular path, right? My assumptions are gone. That's like I have to literally learn this person.
This could be its own podcast series. This kind of conversation where, especially these days with social media, with mainstream media, with all like the divisiveness, right? Mm-hmm. But it's incredible how all that stuff happens at the higher level, and it exists day to day, person to person, of course. Right. But it's incredible how often you don't hear about these kind of conversations, honest conversations. Yes. This is the idea that I think of you. This is the idea you have of me. Let's talk and see where it goes, see what happens. Right. Because I'm not being Pollyannish about it, but I think people have more in common than they have in differences. Yes. But we're not introduced to avenues that allow for those open conversations. Right. And most of it should be one-on-one. Yes. You know, I think speakers are great. I think the work you do is amazing, and you don't have time to go visit. No. You know, and have 2-hour conversations with everybody. No. But I'd love to see more of those kind of conversations happen. Yeah. Like, listen, this is what I thought of you. This is what I thought of. Just say it like that. You're people. Like, you know, we don't know each other. I don't have experiences with your people, whether you're black, brown, whatever it may be. Right. You got to get over the language. Like, I grew up different than you. This is my experience. This is what I see. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to listen. Mm-hmm. And look what happens. One conversation. Yes, a 2-hour conversation, but those are the kind of conversations that I want to hear more about, is really people expressing I don't understand you because I didn't grow up like you. Help me understand. Or I read your book and now I have questions for you. That's amazing. That somebody had that opportunity. That he sucked you in by, hey, I need an autograph. Okay, sit down. I got to talk to you.
I walked away from that conversation feeling blessed by what I learned, and also again motivated, as you mentioned, to continue to see the opportunity to converse with people who are different in whatever ways they are.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I congratulate you on that. Just that ability to have that kind of conversation, to look for those conversations, to pause and listen. I think most people, even if they don't understand you, they just want to be listened to. I think a lot of racism, prejudice, discrimination comes from fear. Fear of the unknown. You know, and we can allay those fears, but it can't happen if people are open to an honest and open conversation.
I facilitated a training on fear, since we were talking a little bit about that, and I was in Florida at a conference, and I took a look at all the different responses that we have to fear, right? And then I discussed all the different reasons why we may be fearful, right? So yes, fearful can come from the unknown, right? It can come from that. Fearful can come from difference, right? From not knowing difference, like knowing different people. Fear can also come from status, right? Like, I'm afraid to lose my status, my place, my things, right? So in each conversation that you have, if you can identify where the fear is coming from, you can usually have a better conversation. Because if you're afraid to lose your status, if you're afraid to lose your income, if you're afraid to lose, the actions that you take to defend those things can be what completely excludes you from thinking about other people's wellness, other people's other people's improvement, other people's circumstances and conditions, because you get completely involved and your brain it freezes on the thought that this is what I have to protect at all costs because I'm afraid to lose that. I'm afraid to experience that. And it was pretty deep. I had a lot of folks that in that group that talked about their fears openly, and it was some of it was, you stings because they're saying things that they have as perceptions, right? But it was good dialogue, right? People, I think, walked away from there feeling a little bit more open to understanding other people's fears and why they react the way they do.
I mean, listen, they're hard conversations, and you hear that all the time. You got to have the hard conversation. You got to have the hard conversation. And I think people think about having the hard conversation as in talking about race or whatever it may be.
No.
It's not that. It has to go deeper than that. And it's not a one-way thing where you're explaining things to them. You have to each side has to meet the other side where they are.
Absolutely.
And then kind of say, okay, let's back up to where I am, where you are. But you gotta meet common ground. And I think, if you're yelling at people that they have to understand things a certain way or see things a certain way, that's not their experiences. But I applaud you for having that great conversation with somebody, because I love hearing when it's one-on-one. There's nobody in between you. There's no TV program. There's no host. There's no keyboard. It's not a keyboard warrior. You're having a real conversation. That's how I think you really get to who the human is.
Yes.
We all have our different cultures and whatnot, but in the end, it's a human that's in front of you. So amazing work, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And then the last thing I wanted to ask you before we start wrapping up, or two more things. Sure. What do you hope other people take from this book? Obviously, you just kind of answered that, but now I want to ask you the question directly. And I think I was going to ask you this question, and then you told the story, so it kind of answers it. But somebody that thinks that maybe this book doesn't apply to them, maybe they don't think that they would learn anything from this book. What do you tell somebody about the book? What can they learn from it that even if they have no experience in any kind of crime, gang activity, gang prevention, nothing like that? Because I believe that there are lessons for everybody. It doesn't have to be every book, every topic, but that people can take away things from books that are out of their ecosystem.
Right.
So for you, what would you tell somebody that maybe doesn't think this book has any lessons for them? What could somebody learn from it?
I feel that folks can walk away after reading this book with the understanding that they may have skills, deficiencies, challenges, perceptions, training that will elicit bad things, that will elicit a mentality against either a person or people themselves, right? Or can lead to actions that they take that are destructive to themselves, right? So if anyone can read this book and say, okay, I didn't go through this, this, and this. However, the the emotional fibers or the
Yes.
emotional things that this person experienced, I have. And because of that, we are more connected than not. And because of that, I need to look deeper within myself to be and do differently because it helps me, but it also helps humanity, right? So I think that that anyone that's reading this book can get that from that is what I feel. So yeah, I'm hoping it's doing that. I've seen it do that. I've seen people that have not lived an ounce of what I have, but when we sit and talk, we walk out of there feeling like we've known each other all of our lives because the emotional spaces that I travel through, most people can relate to. It may that the physical ones maybe not, but the emotional ones is where I think the connection is in the book.
And I was going to ask you quickly about trauma around you going back and reliving moments, reliving events that you had forgotten about, some that were painful, I'm sure. I think you had mentioned. What was your process for getting through that? Because I've mentioned it on here in the series before where I think one of the scariest things to do as an adult is to open up your past and look at your childhood traumas,
Yeah.
your fears, and being completely fucking honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's that's the scariest thing I've ever had to do. You
Right.
know, there's nothing in the world that can compare to the fear you hold of really pulling back the curtain on your own life and saying, okay, this is where this quirk or this habit comes from. This is why I have this chip on my shoulder, whatever it may, whatever the circumstances. So what was it like? How did you process that when you were interviewing people for the book and vice versa and opening up
Yeah.
these past traumas?
Well, I had two coping mechanisms, right? I learned through writing the book too, and through just reliving experiences that I've always leaned on physical fitness or activity or something to that effect when I was at my deepest, darkest spaces. When whether I was in isolation and detention, right? I was in segregation for a month. I had myself, my brain, my wild thoughts, and I had exercise, right? So while I was reliving some of these things, I made sure to always take time to exercise, take time to take a run, take a walk, hit the punching bag, something to kind of dispel, remove, take away from myself all this that was kind of rehashing
It's that
itself.
dark
Right.
energy.
Exactly. So the second was that I looked for spaces that contributed to my overall well-being. So whether it was a space on a platform that talked about positivity, mindset shifting, talked about elevating your emotional intelligence, or positive quotes, positive books, right? So any space that allowed me to draw from the goodness I was getting from that in order to help me work through what I was experiencing. And third, sitting with it for a little bit, brother. I had to sit with some of this, man, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
bawl, just
Yeah.
bawl, man. Just I remember one particular instance where I found out something my aunt did to me, and I was blown away that I remembered it at that moment. When I sat for about 3.5 hours, man, I cried because I never realized this happened to me until I went through this process, right? And I just really felt like, wow, this is also a pivotal moment in why I behaved the way I did. So I sat with it. So first and foremost, found an outlet. Two, found ways to re-energize, kind of recharge with other people's positivity and energy and words, encouragement, and then the last one, I sat with it, man. I sat with some of these things I needed to sit with for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, even with that question, it's never a matter of how do you escape it, how do you get away from it right away, right? Those triggers or those
Yeah.
traumas, but it is like that balance between sitting in it,
Yeah.
because if you run away, it's just going to chase
Because we're
you.
going to chase you.
And if you run away, you're using energy to keep it out of your mind that you could
Yeah.
be using for something else. So,
Right.
thank you so much for sharing those stories.
Appreciate that.
And around, what books have inspired you? What books do you go to that have really impacted you?
Well, recently I read Jim Quick has I don't know if you know who Jim Quick is, but he wrote the book Limitless,
Yep.
and I read the book Limitless for two reasons. One, he suffered a traumatic brain injury when he was a child in a school, and he couldn't think. They called him the kid with no brain when he was little. And he developed a process for being able to recall, think, and be better with your mind. And I needed that because I was having such a difficult time remembering that I needed someone that was relatable to that to give me a guide on how they improve their memory and their ability to recall. But it's also the fact that he was able to overcome the bullying and the harassment of not being able to think and remember and he used that as fuel. So I was motivated by the fact that he used something very negative against him to fuel right his abilities and where he is now. He's an international brain person now, and he helps actors and actresses remember their lines for different movies and all that stuff. So to go from being labeled what he was to the success that he's achieved by practicing small tasks that improve your brain function, but also give you confidence, right? To be able to do that, to give you the will and determination to be out in public and speak and know that your mind is going to work was pretty powerful for me. And then I read a couple of books that I don't know if you the man in the sea. I don't know if
The
man in
Old
the
Man
sea.
of the Sea?
Yeah, the old man in the sea.
Yeah, I read that
I
in school decades ago.
I had never read it before in my life, and I was out in Texas with a friend of mine, and he was like, "Hey, have you ever read the old man in the sea?" And I was like, "No," and I read that book, and it it blew my mind, brother. It just made me realize how you can see things differently.
I'm glad you brought that up because, like I
Yeah,
said, they made us read that. I think, I don't know, grade school, middle school, one of those.
right.
And the thing is, I have the general idea of what the book is, but depending on what season you are in your life, the
Yes.
lessons that you take away from any book are just going to be different. So I thought back then it's like, okay, this guy's fishing for, I forget how many days he's
Yeah.
out there. I think, what was it, a marlin? He
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember that, but I'm like, all right, great. I'm reading about an old man fishing where now,
Yeah.
3.5 decades later, if I
Yeah.
read it, I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, this
Yeah.
is what it's about. Here's the meaning. Again, I can't remember the details, but
Yeah.
now that one's on my radar because I'm curious how
Yeah.
my view of the book will change just based on where I am.
Oh yeah. It really perspective, right? Like that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
Like literally perspective. The perspective from the Marlin and the perspective from him, and then the perspective from the viewer, the people around that saw what was happening, right? It literally opened my mind to wow, I really need to take into consideration even more every action, right? I went to a storytelling retreat with Donald Davis about 6 months ago. And in Donald Davis's story retreat, what I saw was similar to what I read in that book, which was every story has 50 different perspectives, and you can tell the same story 50 different ways. It's still the story, but it's told 50 different ways. It could be from your perspective. It could be from the perspective of the person with you. It could be from the perspective of a bird that was flying over you. It could be from the perspective of so many different ways. In that book awakened me to perspective. So yeah, it was very, very, very powerful
I'll
for
have to
me.
I'll have to go back and revisit that one then.
Awesome.
And then in wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything you want to share that maybe I didn't ask about that we didn't cover? Anything at all you want to put out there for this audience? The floor is
Yeah.
yours, my friend.
Thank you so much. So, as you mentioned earlier in the intro, I am the principal owner of Nazario Motivation LLC, and it is a consultancy company and a development company for human development. And one of the things that I can say is we have at this organization, at this business, now started to include working with systems and schools, educational institutions to help create and design programs and services that better serve their populations, right? And also improve the efficiency and effectiveness of their people, the people and their systems. So for me, that's something that I just launched recently, where I'm looking at not just serving the people directly, but what is it above them that may be altered, changed, refined, and designed to better not only serve the population, but also make the space more functional and more efficient in serving those people and making their staff happier, more peaceful, more productive, and effective. So, folks are listening and they're interested in that. Definitely. Also, I'm writing a third book titled "Move Different." And in that book, you'll see guides and steps of how individuals can use even the smallest pivot in their thinking, their actions, and their words to help encourage success. It could be for groups and it could be for individuals. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do that. And that's kind of like what Nazario Motivation is up to and what I'm up to. So hopefully folks are encouraged to follow and listen and learn.
Absolutely, man. And I'll include all your information, your links, everything when I post this. And again, in this episode, Iran and I talked about his book, Rage to Peace, From Wounded Child to Gang Member to Peace Advocate. He's got a lot going on. He's got a book coming out, September? And then the other book that you just mentioned. So congratulations on all that. I think it's amazing when someone survives what you've survived and you turn around and you're teaching methods, tools, mindsets, especially for kids, how impressionable they are, to just rise above that. And like I said, in most cases, all it takes is somebody to ask you, even as an adult, a question, make a comment, make a suggestion, a recommendation, and it can, like you talked about, it can change your perspective. It can help you pivot a little. So I love the work you're doing, and thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation, man.
Yeah, if I could say one last thing.
Of course.
For me, right, this is really all about what we can do, right, to improve society as a whole. And the reason why is we can't assume that somebody else's problem won't come knocking on our door, right? And by tending to who's ailing, you decrease your chances of ailment, right? And because it's a collective, man, the energy spreads, and eventually will hit your door, man. So have compassion and empathy and desire to see your neighbor well, to see your humanity well, and it'll reward you handsomely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
And if there's anything I might have missed, there's so much to cover, limited time, anything that you want to hear from Iran and his story, any wisdom, knowledge, insights, guidance that I can get from him, let me know. I'll reach out to him. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for everything. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Peace.